It wasn't following my car. It was pacing it. And when I looked over, the man in the passenger seat wasn't a man anymore. Nightbound Bloodline presents. The world is older than our stories. Our legends, our myths of things that stalk in the dark, they are often just echoes. Distorted memories of something that was, and perhaps still is, terribly true. The accounts you are about to hear were sent to us by ordinary people. They are mechanics, nurses, students. They are you. They went about their lives, secure in the reality they knew, until one night, reality shifted. These are their testimonies. Our first story comes from a man who trusted the asphalt and the white lines more than any forest trail. He believed in the logic of engines and maps, until the map led him somewhere it shouldn't have. The thing that paced the car. My name's David. I'm 34. I've been a long-haul trucker for about 10 years now. Anyway. I don't do the overnight routes anymore. My wife, she knows something happened, but I can't. I can't give it words that make sense. Not without sounding like I've lost my mind. I need you to understand something right up front. I'm not a believer in fairy tales. My world is diesel fuel, way stations, and CB static. I've seen some weird stuff on the road. Accidents that make your stomach turn, weird weather, all of it. But it's all explainable. Physics, human error. I don't believe in ghost stories, and I sure as hell didn't believe in monsters. It was last November. I was on a deadhead run through the northern part of the state, about 2 a.m. No load, just getting the rig back to the Home Depot. This was a stretch of state highway, 2 lanes carved through these endless, sleeping pine forests, dark as the inside of a coffin. My headlights were just punching these 2 cones into the black, and beyond that, nothing. No moon, no other cars for miles. The first thing that was off, it was the radio. The local station I had on, just for the hum of a human voice, it started to dissolve into this harsh, staticky screech. Not the normal kind of interference. This was aggressive, like teeth on metal. I went to switch it off, and that's when I saw my fuel gauge was dipping way faster than it should have. I figured I must have a leak, or the gauge was faulty. But I knew I needed to find a service station, and out there, that's a prayer, not a plan. I saw a sign, old and rusted, for a place called Gideon's Bend, 5 miles. Sounded like a town, maybe had a gas pump. I took the turnoff. The road immediately went from bad to worse. Cracked asphalt, potholes that jarred my teeth. The trees here seemed to press in closer, their branches scraping the top of my cab like skeleton fingers. I remember feeling a chill, a real physical cold that the heater couldn't touch. I wrote it off as fatigue. The mind plays tricks when you're tired, right? That's when I saw the hitchhiker. A figure standing under the last working streetlight I'd see for a long time. Just a dark silhouette against the pool of sickly yellow light. He had his thumb out. Now, rule number 1. You don't pick up strangers on a back road at 2 a.m. But something about the utter emptiness, the strangeness of this whole road, made me feel a pang of something like guilt. Or maybe it was just the human shape that appealed to me. A bit of company in the void. I slowed down, pulled over about 50 yards past him. I saw him in my side mirror, just a shape walking towards the truck. He moved evenly. No hurry. I unlocked the passenger door. He climbed up into the cab, and the smell hit me first. Not body odor, not dirt. It was damp, like wet earth and old leaves, and underneath it, something sharp, almost coppery, like a butcher's block after a long day. "Thanks," he said. His voice was flat. No emotion. "Rough night." "Yeah," I said, pulling back onto the road. "You're out late." "I am," he said. He didn't offer more. I glanced over. He was wearing a dark, heavy coat, the collar pulled up, a hat pulled low. I couldn't see his face, just the pale line of his jaw. He was staring straight ahead, his hands resting on his knees. He was perfectly, unnaturally still. No fidgeting, no breathing that I could see. The silence in the cab became thicker than the darkness outside. The only sound was the grind of my engine and the thump, thump, thump of the tires over the cracked road. I tried the radio again. Pure, screaming static. I turned it off. "So where you headed?" I asked, just to break the quiet. He didn't turn, just up the road a piece. 5 minutes passed, then 10. The feeling of wrongness was a physical weight on my chest. My skin was crawling. This wasn't just awkwardness. This was a deep, animal alarm ringing in the back of my skull. Predator, predator, predator. I chanced another look. He hadn't moved an inch. But his hands, were they always that large? The fingers seemed long, curled inward slightly. And the smell, the damp, coppery smell was getting stronger, filling the cab, making my eyes water. "Almost there," the hitchhiker said, his voice now a low rumble that didn't seem to come from his throat. That's when I saw the eyes. In the dim green glow of the dashboard lights, he finally turned his head towards me. The brim of his hat shadowed his face, but 2 points of light caught the reflection. They weren't human eyes. They were a luminous, sickly yellow-green, like phosphorus rotting in a swamp. And they held an intelligence there that was cold, ancient, and utterly devoid of anything I'd call empathy. My blood went to ice. Every muscle in my body locked. He smiled. It wasn't a smile. It was a stretching of the skin around his mouth, and I saw too many teeth, long and sharp and crowded. "You can let me out here." We were in the deepest part of the woods. No light, no houses, just the wall of trees. I didn't argue. I slammed the brakes. The truck skidded to a halt. "Get out," I said, my voice a tight wire. He chuckled, that low, rumbling sound again. "Sure thing, driver." He opened the door and stepped down into the darkness. He paused, one hand on the door frame. His hand was wrong. The fingers were too long, the knuckles too pronounced. "Drive safe now. The roads, they aren't always what they seem." He slammed the door. I stomped on the gas, the tires spinning on gravel before catching. I watched him in my rearview mirror. He just stood there in the middle of the road, getting smaller and smaller, a stark black cutout against the nothingness. For a full minute, I just breathed, shaking, sweating, trying to tell myself it was a trick of the light, that I was exhausted, that the smell was from my own rig. Then I saw the headlights behind me, a single pair, far back. At first, I felt a surge of relief. Another car, another human being. But the relief died as quickly as it came. The lights were gaining. Fast. Too fast for this road. They didn't bob with the potholes. They stayed perfectly level, fixed on my tailgate. My heart started hammering against my ribs. I pushed the truck, taking curves too fast, the trailer groaning in protest. The headlights kept pace. No, not kept pace. They were closing the gap without any visible effort. I came around a long bend, and for a second, the trees cleared on the right-hand side, opening to a barren field. And in the sweep of my headlights, I saw it. It was running, not in a car, on all fours, a massive, shaggy shape, darker than the night, moving with a liquid, terrifying speed through the dead grass, keeping perfect pace with my truck. It was the size of a bear, but its gait was all wrong, a loping, powerful stride that was part wolf, part nightmare. And as it ran, it turned its head towards me. Those same 2 points of yellow-green light locked onto mine. It wasn't following my car. It was pacing it. The thing from the passenger seat, it was out there. And it was faster. A sob caught in my throat. I floored it. The engine screamed. The headlights behind me vanished. But in the field, the shape kept pace, a shadow flowing alongside me like a death escort. I saw a sign, State Highway 10 to 1 mile. Civilization. Salvation. I took the turn onto the wider highway so hard I thought I'd tip. I didn't care. I looked to the field. It was gone. I drove for 2 hours straight, white-knuckled, crying, until I hit a 24-hour truck stop blazing with beautiful, normal electric light. I sat in that lot until sunrise, just shaking. I never went back for my rig. I quit my job the next week. I don't drive at night anymore. I can't. I know what I saw. I smelled its breath. I looked into its eyes. It was no man. It was something that wears men like coats when it needs to. And it's out there, on the old roads, between the places on the map, waiting for a ride. David's account is a chilling violation of a modern sanctuary, the sealed cabin of a vehicle, the path of a known road. It speaks to something ancient that does not respect our boundaries of metal and light. The phenomenon of the predatory hitchhiker, the shapeshifter that lures with a human guise, is one of the oldest and most widespread fears, from the Feyalad of Celtic lore to the skinwalker of the Navajo. David didn't find a monster in the woods. He invited it inside, and it showed him its true face only when the chase began. But the road is not the only place where lines blur. Our next story takes us from the driver's seat to the very heart of the home, a place of supposed safety, where the walls are meant to keep the darkness out, until something finds a way in. The whisperers in the walls. I'm Anya. I'm 29, and I'm a pediatric nurse. My entire life is built around caring for and comforting children. I need you to understand that. I know the sound of a child's voice, their cries, their laughter, their secret, whispered confidences. I know them, or I thought I did. I've always been a skeptic. In my line of work, you see enough real, medical horror that you don't have room for the supernatural kind. Ghosts, spirits. I'd laugh and check your temperature. I believed in germs, in broken bones, in science, not in things that go bump in the night. This happened 2 years ago when my husband, Ben, and I bought our first house. It was a charming, post-war bungalow on a quiet, tree-lined street. It needed some love, but it had good bones, the realtor said. We were so excited. It felt like the start of our real adult life. The oddities started small. We defined cabinet doors in the kitchen slightly ajar when we were sure we declosed them. The distinct, sweet smell of pipe tobacco would appear in the living room, though neither of us smoked. Ben would joke we had a friendly ghost. I'd roll my eyes and blame old house settling, or a neighbor's smoke drifting in. Then, the whispers began. It was always when the house was at its quietest, late at night, or in the early morning gray light. At first, it was so faint I convinced myself it was the wind through the old casement windows or the water in the pipes. But wind and water don't form words. I was in the hallway, putting away laundry, when I heard it the first time clearly. A child's voice, tiny and thread-like, coming from the wall near the floorboard. It didn't come from a room. It came from inside the wall. It said, "I'm stuck." My blood ran cold, not with fear at first, but with professional alarm. My nurse's brain snapped into gear. Was there a child in the house? A neighbor's kid? I searched every room, every closet, under every bed. Ben was at work. The house was empty except for me. I told myself it was my imagination. Stress from the new job, the move. But it happened again and again, never the same voice. Sometimes a little boy, sounding tearful. "It's dark in here." Sometimes a little girl, sing-song and chilling. "Come play with us." The voices were always young, always clear, and always emanating from within the walls. Not through them, from inside them. I stopped sleeping. I'd lie awake, my ears straining in the silence, dreading that next tiny, innocent, impossible voice. Ben heard it once. We were in bed reading, and a small, frustrated voice from the wall behind our headboard said, "I can't get out." He dropped his book. His face was sheet white. What was that? Now we were both hearing it. We had the house inspected for rodents, for pests, for any logical explanation. The inspector found nothing. No animal nests, no weird acoustics. He said the walls were solid. The terror truly set in the night the whispers learned our names. I was in the bathroom, brushing my teeth. The vent above the shower, a small, grated opening, hissed to life. Not with air, with a voice. It was a chorus of them this time, 3 or 4 children whispering over each other, a susurrus of lost, lonely sound. And in the middle of it, clear as a bell, I heard, "Anya, Ben, stay with us." I screamed. Ben came running. We spent that night in a hotel, but we couldn't live in a hotel. We had to go back. The final straw was the scratching. not the light skittering of mice. This was slow, deliberate grating, like small fingernails or perhaps tiny, brittle bones being dragged methodically down the interior of the plaster from the ceiling to the floor. You could hear it move. You could follow its path through the house, room to room, wall to wall. It was a patrol, and wherever the scratching went, the whispers would follow, seeping out like a toxic gas. We brought in a priest. He walked through, blessed the house, said some prayers. He looked uneasy when he left. That night, the whispers were louder, angry. The scratching became pounding, frantic, as if small fists were hammering from the other side, desperate to break through. The worst part was the realization, the terrible, gut-churning deduction. Our house was built in 1948. The whispers were always children. The smell was old, like a grandfather. This wasn't some random haunting. The house wasn't haunted. The house was inhabited. We weren't living in a home. We were living in a tomb. A sealed, architectural tomb for things that were trapped and dying and had been for a very, very long time. And they knew we were out here, in the light and the air, and they wanted us to join them in the dark. We moved out a week later. We sold the house at a massive loss to a skeptical investor. I heard through the grapevine he gutted the place to the studs for a renovation. I don't know what, if anything, he found. I don't want to know. I still work with children. But sometimes, when a child whispers something to me in a quiet room, my breath catches. I have to fight the urge to look at the walls. Because I know now, with a certainty that has broken a piece of my mind forever, that some walls aren't for keeping things out. They're for keeping things in. And sometimes those things can still speak. Anya's experience chills to the bone because it corrupts the archetype of safety, the home. It is not a ghost in the attic, but a presence in the very structure, suggesting a horror that is not an echo of death, but a continuing, conscious suffering embedded in the mortar and lathe. The phenomenon of enclosure hauntings is documented in folklore worldwide. The belief that spirits can become bound to materials, to places of trauma. Were these the echoes of a forgotten tragedy? Or something else, something that perceives our world through the cracks and whispers to be let in? From the sealed darkness of the walls, we journey now into the open, but no less claustrophobic, darkness of the deep woods, where the trees themselves have eyes, and the game is not deer, but man. The hunted. Name's Elias. I'm 58 years old, and I've been a hunter and guide in these mountains since I could walk. My daddy taught me, and his daddy taught him. I know these woods like I know the lines on my own hands. I know every creek bed, every deer trail, the sound of a black bear shuffling through the brush versus a grizzly. I tell you this so you understand. I wasn't lost. I wasn't confused. The woods, they just changed on me. My gut turned to ice. This was communication. I slowly, silently, reached for my rifle. As my fingers closed around the cold steel of the barrel, a third set of knocks came from directly west of my camp. A triangle. I was in the center. Fear, real primal fear, washed over me. This wasn't a bear. Bears don't hold conversations in the dark. I lay there, my heart hammering against the frozen ground, for what felt like hours. I started hiking up the ridge towards my truck, maybe 7 miles east. The feeling of being washed was a physical pressure between my shoulder blades. I'd gone maybe 2 miles when I found the first sign. In the middle of a game trail, placed neatly on a mossy rock, was the severed head of a young buck. It was fresh. The eyes were gone, the neck cleanly severed, not chewed. It was positioned so it stared blankly up the trail I was on. A warning, or a marker. My mouth went dry. I moved off the trail, using all my skill to move silently through the thick timber. I was being hunted. I knew it in my marrow. Every shadow seemed to hold a deeper darkness. Every tree trunk seemed too thick, too still. I reached a steep scree slope, a jumble of sharp basalt rocks. It was open, exposed, but it was the fastest route to the ridge. I was halfway across when I heard the stone fall. Not from above me, from beside me. I turned my head, and there, standing not 30 yards away at the tree line, was the thing that had been knocking. It was tall, 8 feet if it was an inch. It was covered in a shaggy, matted fur that was neither brown nor gray, but a filthy, mottled black like old charcoal. It stood on 2 legs, powerfully built, with arms too long that hung past its knees. But it was the head that stole the breath from my lungs. The sound echoed across the open slope. It was blind, and it was tracking me by sound. The knocking all night. It was them mapping my location, my camp, by the way the sound reflected. They were echolocating, like bats or dolphins. A whimper escaped my throat. The creature's head snapped towards the sound. It opened its mouth, and a low, chattering growl rumbled out, a sound that seemed to vibrate in my own chest. I crested the ridge, my lungs burning, and crashed through the brush towards where my truck was parked. I didn't look back. I flung myself into the cab, locked the doors, and started the engine. As I peeled out down the dirt road, my last glimpse in the rearview mirror was of 3 tall, dark, fur-covered shapes standing at the tree line where the road entered the forest. They were perfectly still, their eyeless faces turned towards my fleeing truck. I haven't set foot in those woods since. I sold all my hunting gear. I get panic attacks now if I'm in a place too quiet. I know what I saw. They weren't animals. They weren't men. They were something that has evolved in the deep, dark places, something that has traded sight for a different sense. And they hunt in packs. They use tools. And they think. God help me, they think. Elias's account strips away the last vestiges of our dominance in the wild. He was not an intruder in nature. He was prey being measured by a superior predator in its own element. The tactical intelligence, the use of tools and sound for hunting. This suggests a consciousness that is alien, yet terrifyingly proficient. Folklore is filled with woodknockers and blind forest demons, but Elias's description of echolocation paints a picture of a creature that has adapted to a perpetual, sunless world beneath the canopy. A world that has been theirs long before we claimed the mountains as our playground. But the wilderness is not only in the forests. Sometimes it exists in the vast, empty spaces between towns, under a sky so big it swallows your screams. Our next story comes from the great, silent desert. The motel at the edge of nowhere. I'm Chloe. I was 22 when this happened. I'm a graphic designer now, but back then, I was just a kid driving cross-country to start an internship in California. Full of that naive, open-road energy, you know? I believed in adventure, in serendipity. I didn't believe in bad places. I thought evil needed people, crowds, history. I was wrong. My car, an old hatchback I called Betty, started making a terrible grinding noise outside of Phoenix. I pulled off at the next exit, which wasn't so much a town as a scrap of civilization tossed onto the desert floor. A gas station, closed. A diner, dark. And a motel. The sign, a flickering neon vacancy sign, read the Sunspot Motel. The building was a single-story, L-shaped strip of faded pink stucco that looked like it had been baking in the sun since the 1950s. It was the only option. The man at the front desk didn't look up from his tiny, static-filled TV. He was cadaverously thin, with skin like old parchment. He slid a key, a real, heavy brass key, across the counter without a word. Room 12. Last one on the end. The room was a time capsule. Faded floral wallpaper, a dusty air conditioner that groaned like a dying animal, and a smell. A thick, sweet smell underneath the disinfectant. Like overripe fruit and something else, something meaty. Exhaustion won out over creepiness. I fell into a fitful sleep. And I dreamed. Not a normal dream. It was hyperreal. I was standing in the desert behind the motel, under a moon so bright it cast sharp black shadows. And I saw them. Figures, maybe a dozen, moving in a slow, shuffling circle around a dark pit in the ground. They were chanting something low, but the words were wrong, guttural, not meant for a human tongue. One figure turned its head towards me. Its eyes were just empty, dark holes. I woke up gasping, the room pitch black, the air conditioner dead silent. The digital clock was blinking 12 o'clock. Power outage. That's when I heard the scratching at my door. Not a knock. A long, slow, dragging scrape, like something with hard, brittle fingertips was being drawn down the outside of the wood, from the top to the bottom. Then silence. Then it started again on the window. Scrape. I froze, my blood like ice water. I fumbled for my phone. No service. The scratching moved, now on the wall shared with the empty room next door. It was circling my room. I did the only thing I could think of. I whispered, voice shaking so bad I could barely form the words, "Who's there?" The scratching stopped. A voice answered. It was right outside the door, pressed against the thin wood. It was the front desk clerk's voice, but wrong, strained, wet, like he was talking around a mouthful of something. Asterisk check out. Is at 11. Asterisk, it wasn't a reminder. It was a threat. I'm staying the night, I managed to say. A low, wet chuckle. Then, no one stays the night. The scratching started again, more frantic now. Multiple sets of hands. On the door, the window, the walls. A dry, rustling whisper joined it, seeping through the vents. Out, out, out. It was a chorus. Not angry, hungry. I was sobbing, curled on the bed, clutching a lamp like a club. I watched the doorknob. It didn't turn. They weren't trying to get in. They were trying to get me to come out. The clock blinked. 3:33 a.m. Suddenly, a new sound, a low, rhythmic thumping from outside, somewhere in the center of the motel courtyard. Thump, 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 like a massive heartbeat. With each thump, the scratching and whispering would intensify, then pause, as if listening. I couldn't take it anymore. I had to see. I crawled to the window, my body trembling violently, and peeled back a corner of the stiff, yellowed curtain. The courtyard was washed in that same unreal moonlight from my dream. And there they were, the shuffling figures. Guests, I realized, or what was left of them. Men and women in old-fashioned night clothes, their movements stiff, jerky. Their faces were slack, their eyes dark and vacant. They were circling the empty swimming pool in the center of the courtyard. But the pool wasn't empty anymore. It was filled with a thick, dark, viscous liquid that reflected no light. And in the center of that liquid, something pulsed rhythmically, in time with the thumping sound. A giant, fleshy, heart-like organ. The desk clerk stood at the deep end. He was facing the thing in the pool, his arms raised. He wasn't thin anymore. His body seemed distended, swollen from within. He turned his head, and his eyes found mine in the window. His mouth split into a grin that stretched far too wide, showing gums black and receding. "Join the circle," his voice echoed in my mind, bypassing my ears entirely. I slammed the curtain shut, backed away, and vomited into the wastebasket. The thumping grew louder. The whispers became screams, pleading, angry, desperate. "Out, out, join us." I knew, with a certainty that killed all hope, that if I stayed until 11 a.m. checkout, I would never leave. I would be out there, shuffling in that circle. I had to go. Now. I threw my things in my bag. I took a deep, ragged breath, unlocked the door, and yanked it open. The courtyard was empty. The pool was empty, dry and cracked. The air was still and hot, but the sweet, meaty smell was overpowering. I ran. I didn't look back. I jumped in my car, said a prayer to a God I wasn't sure listened, and turned the key. Betty coughed, sputtered, and roared to life. I peeled out, spitting gravel. In my rearview mirror, the Sunspot Motel sign flickered once and went dark. But in the window of room 12, I saw a pale face pressed against the glass, watching me go. I drove until dawn, crying and shaking. I took my car to a mechanic in the next real town. He found nothing wrong. The grinding noise was gone. I never told anyone. Who would believe me? But sometimes, on quiet nights, I can still smell that sweet, rotten fruit smell. And I wonder about the other travelers on that lonely stretch of desert highway. I wonder if they see the flickering vacancy sign. And I wonder, with a sick dread, if their checkout time ever comes. Chloe's story is a nightmare of corrupted hospitality. The motel, a way station for the transient, became a trap for the eternal. It speaks to a horror that is not a singular monster, but a location with a metabolism, a place that consumes, that sustains itself on the lost and the lonely. The imagery of the pulsing organ in the pool suggests a literal, beating heart to this evil, a locus of power that binds the victims into a terrible, endless service. It is a reminder that there are places on this earth that are not just haunted, but alive with a malevolence that feeds. Our final story brings us full circle from the vast, empty desert back to the heart of a community, to a small town where the horror wasn't a creature in the woods, but a sickness in the bloodline, a truth hidden in plain sight. The family business in Hemlock Crossing. My name is Thomas. I'm 42, and I was a high school history teacher in the town of Hemlock Crossing. I don't live there anymore. Nobody in my family does. We were outsiders, you see. Come from a ways, they called us. My wife, Sarah, and I moved there for the quiet, for the postcard-perfect streets, and the famed sense of community. We got the quiet. We learned the truth about the community. I'm a man of facts. Dates, documents, cause and effect. I didn't believe in curses or in monsters that wore human skin. I believed in neighborly barbecues and town hall meetings. Hemlock Crossing was famous for two things: its stunning fall foliage and the Vane family. They owned everything: the mill, the general store, half the land. Patriarchs, pillars. Everyone loved them, respected them. The first thing that struck me as off was the town's collective health. Robust, uncannily so. In 5 years, I didn't hear of a single case of cancer. No severe illnesses. People lived long, long lives. They attributed it to the clean air, the well water. I thought it was statistical luck. Then, our dog, Barnaby, went missing. A golden retriever, friendly as the day is long. He vanished one October evening. We put up posters, asked around. People were sympathetic, but their eyes would shift away. Old Mr. Vane, who ran the general store, clapped a heavy hand on my shoulder. His grip was iron strong, his skin oddly cool. Bound to happen, living so close to the woods, he said, his smile not reaching his pale, gray eyes. Predators, you know. We found Barnaby a week later, or what was left of him, drained, not mangled, not eaten, just empty, desiccated, as if every ounce of fluid had been meticulously siphoned from his body. The vet, a Vane cousin, called it a rare parasite, said it was a tragedy. He offered to take the body for us. For the town incinerator, he said. Best not to dwell on it. Sarah got sick the following winter. It wasn't a normal sickness. She became pale, listless, perpetually cold. She developed a severe anemia that no supplement or treatment could touch. Our doctor in the next town over was baffled. He suggested we move. Get her away from something environmental, he said carefully. The final piece fell into place during the annual Hemlock Crossing Harvest Festival. It's the town's biggest event. Bonfires, apple bobbing, a pageant. That year, Sarah was too weak to go. I went alone, feeling like a ghost myself. As midnight neared, a hush fell over the crowd. The Vanes, all of them, from the eldest to the smallest child, assembled on the bandstand. Old Mr. Vane raised his hands. Another bountiful year, he called out. Another year of health and prosperity. And we give thanks. The crowd repeated, we give thanks. It was a chant, ritualistic. Then they brought out the cider, a dark, ruby liquid served in antique copper cups. It was passed among the Vanes first, then offered to select town elders. As I watched from the shadows, I saw something that stopped my heart. Under the flickering torchlight, as a Vane child drank, I saw the subtle, impossible elongation of their canine teeth. Not dramatic, a slight, sharp extension as the liquid touched their lips, then a retraction as they swallowed. A reflexive, predatory gesture. And I remembered the town records I'd idly perused in the library. Census data. No one ever moved away from Hemlock Crossing. And no Vane, in over 150 years of records, had ever died of an illness. They'd had accidents, or they'd moved to care for family elsewhere, but they never simply died. They weren't just a family. They were a colony, a symbiotic organism. The town was their farm. We were the cattle. The perfect, quiet, isolated farm where the livestock didn't even know it was being slowly, carefully grazed upon. The clean air and well water were the result of a population kept meticulously healthy for harvest. Barnaby had been a mistake, a snack taken too obviously. Sarah was falling ill because she was sensitive, because they'd perhaps taken a bit too much from her, testing her vitality. I felt the weight of hundreds of eyes around me. Not hostile, proprietary. I was a resource that was having inconvenient thoughts. I left the festival. I went home, packed a single bag, woke Sarah, and told her we were leaving for a midnight drive to see the fall colors under the full moon. It was the only lie she'd ever believed from me that I hated telling. We drove out of Hemlock Crossing and never looked back. We left everything. Our house, our jobs, our furniture. It was a small price. Sarah's health improved within weeks of leaving. It was the final proof. I reported nothing. To whom? The police chief was a Vane. The mayor was married to one. They were the town. I know what they are. Not vampires of storybooks. No coffins, no capes. Something older, quieter, more insidious. A slow vampire. One that values sustainability over slaughter. They don't take lives. They lease them, drawing a quiet tax of vitality year after year, generation after generation, in exchange for the illusion of a perfect, healthy, timeless community. We live in a city now, surrounded by anonymous crowds. Sarah is healthy, but sometimes, on a cold autumn night, I'll catch a whiff of wood smoke and apples, and I'll freeze. And I'll wonder if, somewhere in a quiet, beautiful town surrounded by deep woods, another young family is being welcomed with open, cold hands, being settled onto the farm. Thomas's account is perhaps the most unsettling of all, for it reveals a horror not of the fringe, but of the center. Not a monster in the dark, but the smiling face that holds the lease to your home and the deed to your town. It is the horror of the gilded cage, of the kindly predator. The Vane family represents a corruption of the very idea of community, turning symbiosis into a gentle, lifelong parasitism. From the desolate road, to the walls of our homes, to the deep forests, the empty deserts, and the heart of our towns, these stories paint a map of a world that is not as it seems. A world where the old things, the hungry things, the patient things still walk. They wear different masks, a hitchhiker's coat, the whispers in plaster, the knock in the deep woods, the flicker of a vacancy sign, a neighbor's smile, but their intent is the same: to remind us that we are not alone in the dark. We are merely visitors. These were 5 horror stories based on real life. If you have a story of your own, a moment where the line between myth and reality blurred, we invite you to share it in the comments below. Your experience may be the key that helps another lost listener understand their own. If you found yourself held by the dark tonight, consider subscribing to Nightbound Bloodline. Hit the bell so you never miss when we venture into the shadows again. Thank you for listening. This has been Nightbound Bloodline. Until next time, sleep with one eye open.